Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome back again to the NPTEL online certification course on research methodology for planning and architectural studies. In last 2 weeks, we have discussed on quantitative research approach. We have seen several case studies on quantitative research. We also discussed about qualitative research, different kind of methods which we can use for doing something on qualitative research. We have also gone through several case studies and also we have seen those kind of applications of quantitative research method. Earlier also I have mentioned that it is not very easy to say out of quantitative method and qualitative method which one is the best. It will depend on the study objective and it will also depend on the overall aim of the research, where quantitative research has certain advantages in quantifying things, making some empirical study. At the same time, qualitative research also has several advantages to explore some of the idea, new area, etc. So, when we compare these two methods, quantitative and qualitative, we cannot have a very specific answer and we cannot just make a race that which one is the best. Sometimes if research requires the application of both quantitative and qualitative research, then we can also go ahead with the mixed method. And in literature you will find several such kind of approaches that researchers have used the mixed method. The quantitative and qualitative, there are different type of mixing, like it may be sequential, it may be integrated. So with that, today we'll be discussing on this mixed method research approach. So let us start our lecture number 51, mixed method research approach. Now in this particular lecture, what we will be talking about, that is about mixed method research approach. We will also discuss various steps for mixed method research. Then also we will discuss the utility of mixed method research. Why all of a sudden that we are discussing about mixed method, where we have defined qualitative and quantitative methods already. Then as I already mentioned in the beginning today, that there are different type of mixed method, like where we can make parallel approach in qualitative and quantitative way, or maybe we can make some conversion from qualitative to quantitative, quantitative to qualitative, etc. That we'll discuss in the design of mixed method research. At the end, we'll also discuss about certain advantages of mixed method research and also the limitation. And then we summarize our findings. Now if we just try to understand that what is mixed method research, basically it is a research method which integrate the quantitative and qualitative approaches to the research in order to answer the research questions. So any method selection will preliminarily depend on the type of research questions that you have. Based on literature, based on past study, when you identify certain research gap and formulate research questions, then it will actually direct you that whether you will go for only quantitative, only qualitative, or you will go with the mixed method. Mixed method also analyze data using statistical method for numerical data as well, and also the content analysis for narratives. So here it is comparing both the qualitative data and the quantitative data. Integrating insight from both types of form overarching conclusion in response to the research questions. Now, many a times what we find that the research question that we formulate, if we only go ahead with the quantitative approach, if we conduct some empirical study, maybe we get certain kind of insight. There will be some statistical values, by that we can infer something. But maybe something is missing. The richness of or the quality of the information. Okay, if it is something related to the perception, related to the behavior of people, maybe somewhere something we are missing. So in that case, it is really important to also think on that qualitative approach, the qualitative aspect of the research, and then we should integrate it. According to Greene et al. 1989, mixed method researchers combine the characteristics of quantitative and qualitative traditions that yield answer to the questions that neither method alone can answer. So this is very important, the last line, that neither method alone can answer. Because if you only go ahead with qualitative aspect, you go for some content analysis, you go for some narratives, but some sort of empirical evidence is missing. So it is not very convincing, you cannot make proper conclusion. So there are certain sort of biasness. Because we have discussed that quantitative research will have much more of objectivity than subjectivity, but where qualitative methods, they mainly enhance the subjectivity of the research, which is also important. I am not ignoring that part, but objectivity is missing to some extent. So if we mix them together, if we blend them together in a proper way, so we can take care of this particular objectivity and subjectivity of the research. So like that, if you just notice about the argument, that there are some strong believers, some researchers only think that quantitative research is the best method because it has all these values and all statistically proven methods, etc. But at the same time, qualitative research, which the researcher they follow and they just have a strong belief that it is actually making some sort of fundamental research where some of the new area, thirst area, new thematic area that can be explored where maybe numerical data cannot reach. But ideally, if you see this particular argument, the research questions drives everything. So again, maybe if I have done one study on quantitative research, or maybe if I personally prefer this kind of numerical empirical analysis, then also I have also done some of the work which is of qualitative in nature, because that particular study demands that particular approach. We cannot fit only quantitative or qualitative data forcefully to a particular research question. So in a whole study, it may also happen that if you have, say, more than one objectives, so in that case one objective may better fit with the qualitative, the other is quantitative. They may be independent objective, or maybe it may happen that first you conduct the qualitative, out of that whatever you have, then you just use that data for the next objective for the quantitative method, right? Now steps for mixed method research. The step number 1, determine if a mixed methods study is feasible. So it is not that to make something very fancy or attractive, we just apply all the methods. It is not required. If your research can be answered, your research question can be answered with only qualitative or quantitative, go ahead with that independent approaches. But if you find that your research requires both of them, then you decide that okay, let us go for mixed method. It is also important to identify a rationale for mixed method study. So you have to justify why for this objective you approach towards qualitative method, and why for the other one you just think of the other method. Third stage is the identify the data collection strategy and type of design. So this type of design, like what kind of mix that we are looking for, that how quantitative and qualitative method can be mixed, and also the data collection, because we have discussed in detail in different case study that depending on your research method, your type of questions will also change, where maybe it can be a very structured questionnaire which can pick up some primary data for quantitative analysis, where you need some sort of open ended say interview data which you can use for a qualitative approach. So once you decide what kind of method that you are going to adopt, accordingly you also identify the data collection strategy. In that particular case, once you decide that, next stage is to develop quantitative, qualitative and mixed method questions. So maybe a question is very particular to quantitative method, a question, several questions may be very much attached to the qualitative approach, and then few questions may go in either of quantitative and qualitative methods. Next stage is collect the quantitative and qualitative data from the field, and after collecting the data you analyze the data separately or concurrently. So that is again we will discuss about the design mix, where one objective you only deal with something like say qualitative method, and the other objective you are just doing it with qualitative data, right, and the other one may be quantitative data. So in such cases it may be done separately, or it may be something that subsequently you are making those kind of test, or you are performing those kind of analysis as and when required. After that, the final stage is write the results as a one or two phase study. So again, if it is a continuous or if it is done concurrently, then it is just one particular result that you are summarizing, you are integrating. If it is two separate approaches, step by step you have followed in your research, then you have to write in two phase, obviously. Now coming to the utility of mixed method research, why all of a sudden we should think about a possible way to use the mixed method. The first pointer is the complementarity. So in this case, both the method quantitative and qualitative, they complement each other. Using mixed methods for the purpose of integrating two expertly different but related answers to the research questions, one gathered from using a qualitative and the other from a quantitative approach. So in this case, maybe the situation arises like that. With the qualitative data you get certain findings which is much more exploratory in nature, and then you confirm the findings through quantitative approach. So exploratory analysis and then confirmatory analysis can be done in a sequence to prove the fact. Next pointer is completeness. The expectation is that out of mixed method, that such a more complete understanding will emerge if the inferences from qualitative and quantitative components of the study are merged effectively. This is something when we say that I just use a quantitative research approach, one may ask that you are missing the subjectivity, because everything is measurable, it is having too much objectiveness into this, but subjectivity is missing. Some of the behavior which is much more of the subjective in nature of the respondent or your target user, they are not being captured. Now, if you go ahead with this qualitative approach where you take care of that, you use some kind of phenomenology or ethnography as approach, and then you find that okay, I have covered the subjectivity area, but then one may question that then it may be bias. You don't have any objectivity, you don't have any kind of objectiveness in your particular finding or on your inferences. So, in that case, to make a comprehensive complete understanding, sometimes it is required to use both the method to confirm the findings or the phenomena. Next pointer is the development. So, mixed method is conducted with explicit or the way we can say the pre-planned or the emergent purpose of obtaining research questions, sampling framework, or the data sources of a second, like that is the qualitative in nature, second strand, second part of your study from the first strand which is quantitative. So, whether you take the quantitative approach first or qualitative approach first, it will depend on your research questions, but it is something where you just try to develop the understanding out of two in a meaningful way. Next pointer is the expansion. So, in this case definitely if you apply both the methods suitably, expanding the answer already obtained in a previous strand of the study. Let me explain this. Say I have just mentioned that when we discussed the qualitative research approach, we discussed it like qualitative approach, they are much more exploratory in nature for new ideas, for new kind of thrust area, and also to capture the subjectivity of the responses of the target user or whom you just interviewed or survey. So, they are much more like subjective in nature. So, in such cases if you obtain certain information in first phase of your study, then you just select a suitable quantitative method which can complement the first one, the findings of the qualitative research, and then you can expand the answer which is already obtained. So, from say qualitative data you have gained certain information, then through empirical study, through quantitative approach to confirm it. So, as true for the confirmation, in this case mixed method research integrates the methods to evaluate the credibility of inferences obtained from qualitative or quantitative strand of a study. So, they are complementing each other. Coming to the compensation, sometimes this method, this mixed method compensate the weakness of one approach over other, like it may be the data correction error or it may be some of the biases, because whenever you go for some sort of qualitative research, as because it is much more of a dialogue exchange, or maybe you can say the observation, that ethnography and also capturing different from the case study, there might be some biases. It may be at the user end, it may be at the interviewer end, it may be at the researcher end to interpret it. So, in such cases definitely once you have certain findings, the other method can actually compensate on it, and then at least try to omit the biases, at least to overcome those biases by comparing the results. The next pointer is the diversity. Conducting mixed method with the hope and purpose of comparing and contrasting the divergent picture of the same phenomena. This is very interesting. When we say about one is complementing each other, one is compensating each other. Then when you talk about diversity, it is something that the same phenomena you study it in a qualitative manner and quantitative manner, and then you can compare, so that you can get certain sort of gap in between this, so that you can take a better call on your inferences. With that, coming to the stage where we discuss the different type of design of mixed method research. So based on literature, what we observed, that most common for such methods to design a mixed method research are parallel, it may be sequential, it may be conversion, or it can be fully integrated. So, we will discuss one by one. So, parallel means where you just carry out the research in two different way, like one qualitative and quantitative, and then finally you merge the findings and then report. Sequential, where you have to conduct one approach first, the findings of one approach will then be taken as an input for the second approach. So, now quantitative or qualitative, which will come first, it will totally depend on the research questions. Now, for the third one, the conversion, we can convert the qualitative findings to quantitative way, or maybe quantitative findings to the qualitative way, and then we can just try to integrate the result, and then fourth one is full integration. So, we will discuss one by one now. Coming to the parallel design method. So, first what you require is the research questions, and the research question itself should have clarity that whether you require both quantitative and qualitative methods or not. So, in this case QL is basically for the qualitative and QN is for quantitative, right. We are using this abbreviation now for all this kind of discussion. So, as because it is parallel, so the research questions which are related to the qualitative research, so we take the appropriate data, we conduct the survey, we collect the qualitative data, and then we do the analysis of qualitative data separately, and then from there we try to bring out the inferences of qualitative data that we collect, and after analyzing that what are the different inferences. Now, in this case definitely whenever you find certain sort of inferences which are not really appealing, or whether you have certain doubts, so always you need to go back to the analysis what you have done. If you require for further analysis to go for a in-depth analysis, you go for more, right, so that you can get the desired result, right. It will also depend on the research question. Now, similarly at the same time, when you have the quantitative data, okay, once you collect the quantitative data, then you analyze it separately and you bring out certain inferences. Again, if there are certain requirement based on the inferences that further investigation is required, further analysis is required, you go back to the analysis. And finally, you have two set of inferences, one from qualitative approach, one from quantitative approach. Then you try to get the meta inference at the end of your research. So, in this case the multiple data collection, like both qualitative and quantitative, require different inferences. We bring together from the findings of two strands, right. So, it has twofold objective or twofold approaches, and then finally a final set of integrated meta inferences are referred. So, where It can be like compared between qualitative or quantitative. It can be complement each other, that what we found in qualitative and then we confirm it in the quantitative, that okay, there is a strong relation, etc. And always you can look back that okay, if it is not uh, complementing, it is something totally diverse, that what could be the possible reason. So look into the analysis and all. Our next design is where you have only one research question, and now we go sequentially. So in this case, first stage is to conduct the data collection, which is first part of the data collection, which is qualitative in nature. We analyze the data and then we try to bring some inferences. Now out of these inferences, definitely we can have certain sort of inferences which will be used in the meta inferences at the end, but mainly the inferences that we have from this qualitative research in the first hand of the research, that we use for our research question 2, where we take the findings of qualitative research as input and then try to develop the further questionnaire where the quantitative approach will be applied. Now for that we collect the data once again. Some of the input may come from this qualitative approach, then we analyze it, then in bringing the inferences, and then finally the meta inferences. So in this particular case, like what is happening, that it is a sequence where qualitative to quantitative mixed method design, in which the research questions of second strand emerge from the findings of the first. So first we conduct the qualitative study and then the second the quantitative. It can be reversed also, like this is just a representation. It may happen that first you conduct the quantitative thing and then you go for the qualitative approach. A final set of integrated meta inferences are made on the basis of both sets of finding, which is very important. Now coming to the conversion design, mixed method research. So here we have research questions, we conduct the data collection, the qualitative data collection, and then we perform a qualitative data analysis, and then we bring out the inferences. If you need more analysis, you go back. But in this data collection, it is a single data collection where from qualitative inputs you convert it to the quantitative input. So many a times we just get certain information like in some sort of quality, like it's like sense of happiness or sense of safety. So we just give some value, like it is I'm happy, or maybe I'm very happy, I'm totally unhappy. So these are different qualitative answers, right? Then you code that particular responses, you go for some kind of coding and convert it to certain value, and then you apply some numerical analysis into it. So it has definitely a relation with the research question, and then you convert. So with a single set of data collection you can perform both. So that's why you are converting the data, the qualitative data, into the quantitative data form, and then you can do the analysis and finally you bring the meta inferences. So here you can see in short form, it is the conversion representation. So qualitative to quantitative, or it may be also quantitative to qualitative mixed method design, in which one type of data that are also transformed and reanalyzed with other method. The final integrated meta inferences are made based on both set of findings like previous. Now coming to the integrated one, where in each stage we just depend on each other finding. So we have research questions, then we have separate data collection for qualitative, separate data collection of quantitative, then different analysis for qualitative and quantitative, the inferences. So it is almost, if you just compare it with the first one, the parallel, and this, it is almost similar except those connections. These connections are important which were not there in that particular parallel design. So, in each stage we are just trying to see some of the input that we take from qualitative to quantitative, quantitative to qualitative. In fact, in their design also we just try to integrate the findings of the model, so that it can give us some sort of simultaneous finding which is having both the input of qualitative and quantitative. The stages of design are iterative, and this particular uh, case is happening both within and across the two strands, which is like the qualitative part of it and quantitative part of it, and then one is modified based on other in all these stages. And finally, we will have a integrated meta inferences based on all these findings that are observed or that are obtained from these approaches. Hope this is very clear. We have discussed parallel approach, we have discussed about sequential approach, we have discussed about the conversion, and this is integrated where each stage we are trying to compare. Now, coming to the advantage of mixed method research. So, we will be discussing all these advantages under certain pointers. The comprehensive insight, as we already discussed in utility, that it offers a thorough understanding of research by combining the qualitative depth with the quantitative breadth. So, in this case, like it is balancing the subjectivity and objectivity. Then triangulation is also something that we discussed here. So, mixed method enhances the validity by cross verifying the findings from different methods, uncovering the inconsistencies and refining the interpretation. Complementary strength, that already we have discussed, that it combines the qualitative richness with the quantitative precision. So, whenever we say that okay, when you apply the qualitative method in a proper way, so your data, the quality of data is very rich, you can capture those kind of behavior and complex phenomena, which sometimes through quantitative technique or quantitative method it is difficult. But at the same time, empirical evidence having much more precision, there are less biases, so it combines both. By that, it is actually leveraging the unique strength of each method. Next pointer is enhanced validity and reliability. So, mixed method increases the credibility by integrating diverse data sources and different analysis technique, where we can look at different approaches simultaneously or in sequence to bring out certain meta inferences. Flexibility. So, mixed method allows for tailored research design to suit the specific question and context. So, it is not like you have only one kind of approach or design for mixed method. We have discussed 4, so you can apply any one based on your requirement. Addressing complexity. So, mixed method is ideal for tackling multifaceted research questions that require nuanced exploration. So, exploratory and confirmatory thing can be addressed. Cross validation. So, mixed method validates finding through multiple methods, mitigating the biases and increasing the confidence in results. So, again balancing subjectivity and objectivity, reducing biases is one of the advantage of mixed method. Next pointer is engagement with stakeholder. So, mixed method definitely facilitate interaction with diverse stakeholder, enriching the relevance and applicability of research findings. So, as because whenever you go for in-depth personal interview, you just again discuss the result findings. So, in such cases definitely will have much more engagement with the stakeholder. Now, along with so many advantages, there are certain limitations as well for the mixed method approach. Let us discuss that one by one under different pointers. Now, complexity in design. Though we have shown pictorially that different type of design, parallel, conversion, you have sequential and integrated, But designing and executing mixed method study can be complex and resource intensive. So this is very much pertinent because it requires so much of clarity, and sometimes for the same objective, if you perform both the analysis and then you have to collect the information, so it is obviously the resource intensive. Next one is the integration challenges. So definitely whenever we are merging the qualitative and quantitative data, it poses some challenges in synthesis and interpretation. Sometimes if you get some kind of diverse result, so how to interpret it? Resource intensive, already it requires more time, more funding, personal manpower compared to single method, because you are taking two methods, and also if that is for only one particular phenomena that you are going to study. Potential for conflicting results. So qualitative and quantitative findings may not always align, and that is why I am saying that for one particular object, if you get diverse result, then it's the question that which one is true. So sometimes it is some sort of problem and leading to discrepancy. Now when you consider the generalizability concern, so findings may be less generalizable due to the context specific qualitative and sampling issue. So definitely it is something contextual, that is true for all this qualitative data, which is having certain limitation already discussed in that lecture. Sampling challenges. So selecting appropriate sample for both qualitative and quantitative components can be challenging, because as we discussed, for the qualitative research maybe a smaller sample can be a good sample, but for scalability in quantitative research we need certain minimum sample that we have discussed in, even we discussed in several case studies the way they have adopted, but we discussed for some survey that they have used 500 plus responded. In some cases for some buildings and all, they only consider around 50 odds buildings, but both are scientifically acceptable because of the nature and the content. Time constraint. So mixed method research often requires a longer time frame, impacting the project deadline. So this is obvious whenever, like if you try to go for both the method, so it will take some time, definitely it will increase the time and the cost. Potential for bias. So mixing method may introduce bias, requiring vigilance to minimize the subjective influence. So this is to be done with care, so that there should not be unnecessary some sort of bias, or there are much more subjectivity how you compare the findings of two different methods together. Hope this discussion is very useful, because whenever we decide some method for our research, so even if we understand the research question perfectly, then also this kind of doubts are always there. Should we only go for quantitative, or should we only go for qualitative, or the mixed method? But looking at the advantages and limitations, the researcher must be careful to select that what kind of mix that they will prefer, whether they will do in a sequential manner, or it is something that they need to integrate it. So with that we end this particular lecture. So in the summary, what we have understood, what is mixed method research approach, and the key inferences out of it, that mixed method is having several advantages and utility over individual method, because individual method may have certain issue with the subjectivity and objectivity, but in mixed method we can overcome that. But along with that we have to be careful, and we just check whether our research questions requires this kind of approach or not. Otherwise, like if it is not required, if it can be solved with one of either like qualitative or quantitative, then there is no need for investing time and resource to make it complex with the mixed method. We have also discussed about different steps of mixed method research, we have discussed different utility, and also the design of mixed method, where we have discussed 4, where you have, it can be parallel, you have also the sequential, then we have discussed about the conversion, and then integrated. At the end, we have discussed about several advantages and also the limitations of mixed method research. So, with that I conclude here, and to explain it, next we will be discussing a case study. So, these are some references that you can go through to get more onto this particular topic. So, next in lecture number 52, we will be discussing one case study of such mixed method research, where one method is actually used to get certain kind of relationship between certain parameters, and the other method is trying to compare it and confirming it whether it is true or it is not, right. So, with that I end here. Thank you so much for joining the course. We will be meeting you soon. Thank you.